this is hard to talk about. It was really a very hard week for me, and I was trying to be optimistic. Hey guys, it's Angel and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna just do a quick bump date to go over how my appointment went with my maternal fetal medicine doctor, and I just want to kind of briefly go over the story about the first trimester. I know I've mentioned that in a few videos now, and I just kind of want to get that out of the way and finally tell you what happened so I can leave that behind me and look forward to the rest of this pregnancy and his birth. So I think I will start with the first trimester story so that I can just get that out of the way, especially since that's from the past, and then we can talk about how my appointment just went and show you how my bump is growing and all of that. So I think I might have mentioned in previous videos, but basically the reason why I announced my pregnancy so late into pregnancy this time, I was into my second trimester, that was because we just had a lot going on. I just had a feeling something was wrong. I mean, that started even from the get-go. As soon as I found out I was pregnant, the day that I took the test and found out I was pregnant, I was already bleeding, and I've never bled that early with my first two pregnancies. I usually was fine until 5 weeks with them, so it really worried me that I was bleeding so early on. I was also charting, and I was taking my temperature for my charts, and my temperature was lower than it had ever been with pregnancy before. It had dipped below the cover line and was also barely above it even when it wasn't below it, and the temps just didn't look promising to me. And I know that you kind of take that with a grain of salt and it doesn't mean much, but it was just so different from my previous two pregnancies. And when I went to urgent care because I was bleeding, my levels were really low. Now granted, I was also extremely early. I found out 9 days after ovulation that I was pregnant, so my HCG was 32. Well, obviously it was just because it was very early, but it's kind of hard to say that early on if it means that it's just early or if something is amiss. I was also having symptoms of an ectopic pregnancy. It hurt really bad just on the one side, and that really worried her, and she wanted to do an ultrasound to rule out ectopic, but I would have had to wait for an additional 3 hours for the ultrasound tech on duty to be available to do it. And at this point, I had already been there for about 3 hours or so with the two kids by myself, and Justin didn't even know I was pregnant yet. I didn't want to have to tell him that way. I wanted to surprise him and tell him in a special way, which I did end up doing, and I can put that in the iCard in the description. I totally tricked him. He totally didn't see it coming. I really wanted him to be surprised. And I knew that I was so early that they wouldn't be able to see anything either way anyway. So I knew it would just be a waste of time. So at that point, I just left AMA so that I could go home, and they gave me the instructions on what to look for, what to come back for. And I was, left feeling cautiously optimistic that things were gonna be okay. Now, a couple more weeks went by and I continued to still have pain on one side, and it just really was freaking me out, especially since one of my friends did have an ectopic pregnancy that ruptured her tube, and I was really scared of that happening to me. So I called my regular doctor, got me in to do an ultrasound and try to rule that out. And I got that done. I think I was 6 weeks, 5 days, somewhere around there. And lo and behold, there he was, where he was supposed to be, with his heart beating away. So it was such a relief to see that it was not ectopic, and as far as we knew, was a viable and healthy pregnancy. So I left that appointment feeling really hopeful that things were going to be okay, because I knew that once you see the heartbeat, the risk of losing the baby goes down by a lot. A little less than 2 weeks later, I was about 8.5 weeks pregnant, and I got up in the morning and I went to the bathroom, and there was a lot of red blood, like a lot. And I have had bleeding with all of my pregnancies. I had it at 5 weeks and around 8 weeks with both Caledon and Kerrigan. I also had it around 12 weeks with Cal, and it's always scary. It never gets easy, but I had never had so much. And I've never had it be quite so bright red either. I mean, honestly, I was like half asleep. My first thought was like, oh, I started my period. Like, that's what it was like. Sorry for the TMI, but I just kept wiping and wiping and wiping. It just was a lot. And then I realized, wait a second, I'm pregnant. And I just started crying, and I went downstairs and I was just crying, and Justin was like, what's wrong? So again, I went to urgent care. He watched the kids. I went by myself, and they wouldn't do an ultrasound. They were like, well, you already had an ultrasound. We already saw it's in your uterus, so we're just not going to do it. And that just really made me upset. Especially once you are that far in pregnancy, an ultrasound is the best way for them to see if something of the pregnancy is viable or not. It's just the most reliable way once you can see a heartbeat. She wouldn't do it. She did a pelvic exam. My cervix was closed, so that was a good sign, but she said that my cervix was very friable. It was very irritated. And she did the blood draw for the HCG, but she said it looked good because it was still trending upwards from, you know, the last times that it was drawn. I went to get the second draw 2 days later, and a couple of days after that, my doctor personally called me. And the thing about the Naval Hospital is they usually have a nurse call you. The one and only time that my literal doctor called me personally was when he called to tell me that I had ankylosing spondylitis, because that wasn't very good news. He said that the levels had dropped, and he said, you know, this could just mean that, God, I'm like, I know that it's a good outcome and it's still emotional for me. He said that it could mean that it's just, you know, everything's normal, and sometimes in pregnancy your levels just start kind of dropping. They kind of plateau and then start dropping a little, and that's normal. But granted, that generally doesn't happen till a little bit later, or he, you know, something could be wrong. He wasn't really sure, so he wanted me to have an ultrasound with radiology. So I called radiology, and they literally couldn't get me in for like a full week. And so then I was like panicking and crying, and I was calling around. I was trying to find any way that I could be seen sooner, and there was just no way. And that same day that radiology could have got me in was when I was finally going to have my OB appointment, which I knew would include an ultrasound anyway. So I just went ahead and went to that instead. One of my friends watched both the kids for me, and Justin's work actually let him off early to go with me so that we could go together, and I wouldn't have to be by myself or have the kids be there to witness that in case something was wrong. I researched the heck out of it during that week, and it seemed like most people, if they had just a normal drop for no reason, it was more like 10, 12, 14 weeks, not 8. It was really a very hard week for me, and I was trying to be optimistic, but I had never ever had my levels drop before. I'd never not had an ultrasound to reassure me, so to be completely unaware, because I hadn't had an ultrasound, you know, for a few weeks before, and I just felt like I was gonna get blindsided. So we went to the appointment, and before the doctor started, he said, so your levels dropped, so we don't know what we're gonna see today. Like, he was trying to prepare us for the worst. At this point, I was just about 10 weeks, and so he wanted to try to start with the transabdominal ultrasound first. So he put that on, and we were looking, and God, this is hard to talk about. It looked like their baby was not alive. We couldn't see the heart beating, and it didn't look like the baby was moving. Like, it looks to be about the size that it should be, but nothing was happening. And so it just, my heart just dropped, and so did Justin's. I could see it all over his face. So he's like, okay, wait, let me try the transvaginal. Then he turned the screen away from us so that we couldn't see. And when he started that, he was kind of sitting there looking for a minute, and it felt like an eternity. Like, it couldn't have been more than like literally a minute, but it felt so long. And I just thought that was it. And Justin told me after, he was like, I thought that was it. I thought that was the end. Like, I thought we were gonna get bad news. But he goes, oh, the baby's moving. Yeah, he's obviously, and then he turned it and showed us, and he was moving his little tiny gummy bear limbs, and I could see his heart beating, and it was such a relief to see that he was okay. But that was just a really hard couple of minutes, and I just can't even imagine what it feels like for parents who do actually have a loss, because that was just so emotional and hard for us. And then we went over the baseline labs that they had run the week prior. Because of my history having pregnancy-induced hypertension with my first 2 children and my autoimmune condition, ankylosing spondylitis, they just wanted to get a baseline. So I did the 24-hour urine, I did a whole bunch of blood work. I mean, it was ridiculous, like 10 vials or something. It was a lot. And in that testing is how they figured out that I had gestational diabetes. More about that in a future video. It's a lot to talk about, so I will definitely make a video about that, probably more than one video about that actually. So we talked about the labs. It was a really long appointment. We were there like literally 2 hours. Fast forward a couple more weeks and I did the genetic testing, and he was like, oh yeah, I forgot to get that, let me go get those results. And he left and was gone for literally 45 minutes. And the more time that went by, the more I was worried that it was going to be bad news, because I was like, why is it taking so long? And then he came in and said, oh, everything was negative. So for me, that was the last straw. I was done with the Naval Hospital after that. I don't think that doctor was a terrible doctor in itself. He's actually one of the better doctors they have there. But just the way everything was handled, the way that they refused to do that ultrasound the second time at urgent care, and that they even did HCG draws that late in pregnancy. They usually don't do it that late in pregnancy because there is such a wide variation of normal and it doesn't tell them a lot. And because it can drop sometime towards the end of the first trimester, and apparently there's a wide variation of that too, and so it doesn't really tell them enough. And when an ultrasound is just a quicker and more sure way of seeing the viability of the pregnancy, I just didn't feel like it was the best place for us, and that is why I switched to TRICARE Standard, which is now called TRICARE Select, so that I could go to a civilian OB and a civilian hospital to have my birth. And I have to go pretty far for that. It's in Tacoma, so it is about a 45-minute drive, but it has been worth it. My care has been so much better. So that's the story of the first trimester and why we thought we were losing him more than once, and why it was just very hard for us and very emotional for us, and why we kept holding off on announcing. I mean, we didn't even tell the kids until I was like 9 weeks. And the only reason I told them at that point was because there was a mini photo session that I was going to go to that I was going to use to take announcement pictures. So I had to tell them first. We told my dad. We ended up telling my dad and stepmom later that day, some other parents and whatnot around that time, and then a lot of people didn't find out for another few weeks after that. Now, as far as my maternal fetal medicine doctor, so he is actually in Gig Harbor, which is a little bit closer than Tacoma. New OB referred me to him because if you have gestational diabetes or some other things that make you really high risk, it's just usually good to have an MFM also be following your case and have just an extra pair of eyes and someone who's even more specialized in high-risk complicated pregnancies. And so I went to him and they did a very thorough ultrasound. They basically did an anatomy scan, a BPP, which is biophysical profile, and a growth scan all in one. It was really long. She didn't print out any pictures though, unfortunately. He is perfect. And the placenta was looking great. The fluid was absolutely great. The biophysical profile section of it, he passed with flying colors, like max points. Everything was great. I mean, as soon as we started, we could see him practice breathing. It was really cool to see. I've never seen that in an ultrasound. It literally looked like he was breathing. Like his chest was moving just like he was breathing. It was really cool. And he also got hiccups a little bit later. It was really cool to see that on ultrasound too. And he was head down and just everything was looking fantastic. He's still on the same growth curve. He was 69th percentile for 32 weeks, which is when it was. So approximately 4 pounds, 10 ounces. And the MFM came in and he was just thrilled. So he talked to me in depth about how GD works, you know, why it's a high risk and all that. So again, in that gestational diabetes video, I'll talk more about what he talked about. He said my blood sugar was very well controlled. He was really happy with where they were at. They're obviously not negatively affecting the baby because he is growing normally. He's a little on the bigger side of average, but still average. And remember, Cal and Kerrigan were both big. They were both almost 9 pounds without gestational diabetes. So he's actually on track to be about the same size, probably actually even a little bit smaller. So he's not getting too big because of gestational diabetes. His head is bigger than his shoulders. So that's what they want to see. With gestational diabetes, they're usually worried about the shoulders being too big and being bigger than the head. So the head usually needs to be the biggest part. And if the head makes it out, then the rest of them can make it out. He was very confident we could wait till 39 weeks and maybe even all the way up to my due date, even before needing to induce if he didn't come on his own by then. I left that appointment feeling really confident that like we're gonna make it to full term. I've never not had a full term baby, so I was kind of worried about what it's like to not have a full term baby. And before anyone says 37 weeks is full term, it is no longer considered full term. The American College of Gynecologists or Obstetrics, ACOG, I can't remember what it stands for. They changed the guidelines in 2013, actually during my pregnancy with Karen, that 37 and 38 weeks is early term and 39 and 40 weeks is full term. So it's really 39 weeks is really the best outcome for babies. If you can make it that far, they're way less likely to have any issues with feeding, breathing, temperature, all of that stuff, because their brains and lungs still develop quite a lot in between 37 and 39 weeks. Fingers crossed. And that's about when we're shooting for my dad to come visit, is around like right before 39 weeks, so that hopefully he would be here for the birth and hopefully Justin will be back home in time. He doesn't get back till like right before my due date, so it'll be kind of hard, but it's at least kind of possible this time instead of, no, the baby's definitely gonna be early. So I'm just kind of feeling really hopeful. Things are going really well. We're feeling really healthy, and that is good. So let's go ahead and look at that belly shot and see how we're growing. So I'm at 33 weeks now. So we're getting pretty close to that. Delivery day is coming so quickly. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my future bump dates and birth and baby related videos. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.